Welcome to the Data Literacy Show, the podcast that helps organizations build, measure, and level up their data and AI literacy.
I'm Ben Jones, co-founder and CEO of Data Literacy here at dataliteracy.com. We are here to help you learn the language of data and AI through hands-on training and assessments.
Yes, and I'm Alli Torban, the Senior Data Literacy Advocate here at Data Literacy. Now, last episode, we shared our impact framework to help you create better data stories. And this episode, we're excited to share our tried and true wisdom framework. It's this process that Ben created, and it helps you analyze data and find meaningful insights no matter what tool you're using.
Right. So if you've ever found yourself staring at a spreadsheet and just hoping that that insight would somehow pop off the page and find you, well, then this episode is for you.
Yes, right. It's really hard to know where to even start. So I really love how this framework can work with any tool that you want to use because it's more centered around thinking critically, making observations, rather than jumping straight to, hey, use this formula, make this chart to do your analysis.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was at Tableau all those years ago, this was the skill that I saw people most lacking. Just thinking critically, thinking systematically, thinking with data. And that's a little harder to teach than just data tool X.
hmm Yeah, it's a way of thinking. So having a framework is really helpful. So
Right.
can you first start by telling us what wisdom stands for? It's an
Yeah.
acronym. What does wisdom stand for?
Right. So wisdom, in the wisdom framework, there are four main phases. So W is for wonder, S is for shape, D is for discover, M is for mature. And of course, there's an IO there. So in between W and S, you got the I for input. In between D and O, you have the O for output. So wisdom helps you get from a question to an impact, a change that you make in your organization.
Right. Okay, so let's dive deep into each one, each part of the wisdom framework. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I just shared my screen so you can see the wisdom framework. It's a workflow that you can look through and work through. And if you are listening to this, just head over to the show notes and we have the image there so you can catch up. But we'll describe everything so you can
Yeah.
follow along on audio. So don't worry about that.
Think of it like this, right? There's four columns. Each column, it's basically a flow chart. So for those of you who are listening and you don't get a chance to go to the show notes right away, there's a series of boxes and they're organized into these four columns, one for each of those four phases. And what I love about this framework is that each of those four phases has a very different, sort of distinct feel. What I mean by that is, in the first phase, for example, we call that the wonder phase. So let's start there. And you'll see as we go that they're each building and also changing your thought process and giving you the opportunity to apply totally different tools and skills. So in the wonder phase, what are you doing here? You're starting out, right? So you're slowing down, you're sharpening your thinking, you're trying to observe what's going on around you in the organization. You're trying to really glean the most worthwhile questions from the real world, and you're forming hypotheses about what you might find as you come to an answer to that question.
Right. Yeah. And in our course about this, we have something called the dozen hows, which I really love because it's different types of questions you can ask when you're doing your data analysis. Things
Yeah.
like how much, how often, or how does this compare?
Yeah, so a lot of people already know about the five W's and one H, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Every journalist learns that. We all learn that in undergrad. And that's a great framework, but it's a little general. And so what we tried to develop was a list of questions that are really commonly useful for applying to your data. And what you're trying to do here in this phase, more than anything, is just really create a falsifiable hypothesis. So you want to be able to prove yourself wrong with data. I think a lot of the times the instinct is to, or at least the desire is to prove yourself right. I mean, I think that's human nature. We love to be right, but it's much more powerful when you find out that what you thought all along is actually in needing of updating. So that's, I think, a powerful outcome of working with data is realizing that your hypothesis wasn't right. And if you're humble and you can stay honest and rigorous, then again, that's a very powerful outcome. So in this wonder phase, you're also getting to the end of that phase. What are you doing is you're saying, well, do I have relevant data to test this hypothesis? And if not, well, then you have to go out and find it, or you have to maybe gather it or even create it yourself.
Yeah. And once you have data or you have created it, we move then to the shape phase. So what happens here, Ben?
Yeah, so now we're totally changing gears, right? So we're not in this sort of theoretical, philosophical mode of thinking anymore. We're instead rolling up our sleeves, getting really technical, getting our hands dirty with data. So you start by just exploring the contours of the data set itself. You're just checking out what's there. What's its quality like? Does it have any shortcomings? You're just sort of, sometimes we call this data profiling, but it's important to go through this step before you start analyzing it because you often find some interesting facts about the data set that you didn't understand beforehand, that
Hmm.
would really change how you would use it. But the goal here is just to prepare this data set for you to conduct your analysis. So you might have to find nulls or missing values. You might have to find typos or inconsistent formats or currencies or units of measure, all those things you're looking for in the shape phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all know how Excel likes to mess up date formats for us.
Y-
So always look
Right.
for that. And you might need to use some data prep techniques like some pivots or joins, unions, aggregations.
Yeah, right. We all know the VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. And then, of course, we graduate to data models. So you're trying to ask yourself here, is this data set sufficient? Do I have multiple tables that I need to bring together? What about the ethical implications of this data set? And ultimately, is it ready for analysis?
Hmm. Yeah. And then if it is, then you can go to the discover phase. That's the next phase. And this is actually where most people start. They just jump in and start analyzing. But I like how in the wisdom framework, this is actually step three.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you know, the first two phases don't have to take hours and hours. You can maybe go through them fairly quickly, but it's important to do them anyway. But now you're preparing yourself to be able to conduct sound analysis in this discover phase. You're doing this analysis. What happens here? Well, as we all know, the visual language of data, this is a super powerful shortcut for our brains to find patterns, find trends, find outliers in the data. So, you're probably going to want to create a chart or a set of charts. You're trying to get a sense of what's there. You're trying to really see if your hypothesis has legs or not. And once you put your data in living color, you're going to then maybe have to ask yourself about the practical significance of any findings that you come across. Does it really matter? You might also need to test statistical significance. That really is a special case when you're dealing with surveys or polls, maybe anything that involves sample data rather than data from the full population.
Right. Yeah. And then after every kind of analysis that you're doing, you want to ask, hey, does this answer my original question? Maybe I need to go back and uh, reshape my data in some kind of way or rethink my question or hypothesis entirely.
Yeah, so a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, what's the best thing that can come of working with data?" That you answer your question. And while that can be great, actually, sometimes it's even more valuable to come up with a brand new question that you didn't already have at the
Mm.
beginning. So this involves a lot of iteration. And so this is not a super linear process that we follow when we're diving into a data set and really making great use of it. It's going to be iterative. There's going to be lots of rework. And that's okay. It's not just okay, that's good because that shows that you're evolving in your thinking. It shows that you're getting even deeper into the data set, uncovering issues, revising, and to your point, finding a brand new question and going back. And that's great. That's not a failure to go back to step one. That actually might be a huge success.
Hmm.
And then you get to this final phase, right? The fourth phase of mature. You sort of already have your O or output, which is your aha, your insight. So you're not done yet. A lot of people and maybe analysts make this mistake of thinking, well, once I get my insight, I'm done. I just share it. But you need to do a little more in many, many cases in order to have that insight be a true force for action. So what are you doing here, right? You need to kind of spend a little time to craft a compelling message. You really need to design your visuals with clear annotations, good use of color and design, really, with a purpose in mind, right? So that you can present it to that audience. And it isn't just about the presentation in many cases. What are you trying to do there? Actually gauge the reaction of your audience, getting feedback from them, looking at their reactions, making refinements if their insights or questions take the analysis even further. And again, you refine once again and then deliver. And then that's where you're trying to get to really ultimately is a meaningful change that this insight makes in the world.
Yeah. And I have definitely been guilty of skipping this step, like
Yeah, me too.
screenshotting my exploratory charts, pasting it in a slide deck.
Yep.
But it is so important and really makes a difference to consider your audience. Maybe you need to redesign some of your exploratory charts a little just to make sure they're really highlighting the message or the insight that you want your audience to take away.
Yeah, and thinking about it from their point of view, which is we all know is so important, but you're trying to make sure this analysis is making a difference to the audience and ultimately to your organization. And then what you can do is, well, track whether this analysis resulted in some decision or some action in many cases, and seeing then you're back to the beginning where you're observing the world in a new way after your insight has been implemented.
hmm Yeah, and it's really simple. We just walked through it. It gives
Yep.
you a structure that you can use over and over again. And it actually really builds your credibility with your team, on your team, because you're consistently producing analysis that is really thought out and it leads to real outcomes. So I think if you use this, you'll quickly find yourself one of those indispensable team members.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what's the most important part of becoming a great data analyst. Lots of people know how to use tools.
Yeah.
Lots of people, and those tools are getting in some ways easier with generative AI in the sense that you're just using natural language prompts. In another sense, they're getting a little more complicated because we need to check those outputs very carefully. But at the same time, if you really want to go from a good to a great analyst, it's all about the process and it's all about your thinking and how you're applying what you're doing with the data to the real world and bridging the gap to the human realm, right? The human element connecting with your audience, driving change.
hmm Okay. All right. Let's recap what we covered today. So we have the wisdom framework. Wisdom is an acronym. We have four main phases: wonder, shape, discover, and mature. And you also have data input and data output in there as well. And the main benefit of this is it helps you think critically and iteratively about data. And the best part is that it's tool agnostic. You can use this process no matter what tool or platform that you work in.
Right. And if this sounds helpful, you can learn more about each step. And we just launched a brand new revamped version of our on-demand course called Data Literacy Level 2, the Wisdom Framework for Data Analysis. It's going to walk through each of these steps. You got a lot of videos, you got exercises, you got case studies and real world examples in there too.
Yep. And you'll find the link to the full course in the show notes. And I will also link to the free lesson that we provide where it's the wonder phase. And you can get that for free on the link in the show notes.
Bingo. Yeah. And then, of course, as always, right, if your team needs this live, either in person or virtual, hey, we're all about that too. We can even customize these courses to fit your specific situation and needs. So go to dataliteracy.com, look for contact us at the top. You're going to get right in touch with my co-founder, our COO, Becky. She'll set up a call. We'll figure out what you need there.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Data Literacy Show. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who also wants to increase their data analysis skills.
And, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We got more episodes coming your way. And again, as Alli mentioned, everything we talked about today, you'll find in the show notes over at dataliteracy.com.
All right. See you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.